In a quiet little town surrounded by lush green hills and thick forests, there lived a boy named Ethan. He was 16 years old, with curly brown hair and bright, curious eyes that always seemed to be lost in thought. Ethan wasn't like most teenagers his age. While other kids spent their afternoons playing sports or hanging out at the mall, Ethan preferred spending time alone in his room, sketching pictures of knights, castles, and epic battles. His walls were covered with drawings, some simple, some incredibly detailed, that told stories only he could fully understand. Ethan had autism, which made it hard for him to connect with people the way others did. Conversations felt tricky sometimes, and loud crowds overwhelmed him. But none of that mattered when he was drawing. With a pencil in hand, Ethan created entire worlds where brave knights fought dragons, kings ruled wisely, and everyone followed a code of honor. These weren't just random doodles. They were his escape, a place where he felt safe and understood. Every evening after school, Ethan would rush home, grab his sketchbook, and dive into his imagination. His favorite subject was medieval history. He loved reading books about knights who swore oaths to protect the weak and uphold justice. One of his prized possessions was an old, tattered book about King Arthur and the Round Table. He'd read it so many times that the pages were worn and soft. To Ethan, these stories weren't just fiction. They were lessons about courage, loyalty, and standing up for what's right. But as much as Ethan enjoyed being in his own world, loneliness often crept in. At school, he sat quietly during lunch, watching groups of friends laugh and chat while he picked at his food. Sometimes, classmates teased him because he talked differently or got nervous around too many people. It hurt, but Ethan never let them see how much. Instead, he buried himself deeper into his drawings, imagining himself as one of those fearless knights from his sketches, someone strong enough to face anything life threw at him. His family loved him dearly, but even they struggled to understand everything going on inside his mind. They saw how passionate he was about medieval tales and decided to encourage his interest. For weeks, Ethan worked tirelessly on creating his very own knight costume. Using cardboard boxes, tin foil, and paint, he pieced together a suit of armor that looked surprisingly real. Every detail mattered. The crest on the chest plate, the tiny scratches on the helmet, even the sword he crafted from a wooden dowel wrapped in silver duct tape. This project gave him purpose, something to focus on when the outside world felt overwhelming. Despite all his efforts, Ethan knew deep down that attending the Renaissance Fair, a yearly event held just outside of town, was unlikely. Tickets cost money, and his parents were already stretched thin trying to make ends meet. Still, he couldn't help dreaming about walking through the fairgrounds, surrounded by people dressed as knights and princesses, feeling like he belonged somewhere magical. That dream lingered in his heart, quietly whispering promises of adventure, even though reality kept telling him otherwise. Little did Ethan know, however, that someone was about to step into his life and change everything. Someone who would see past the quiet boy sitting alone on a park bench, clutching his sketchbook tightly. Someone who believed that dreams, no matter how big or small, deserved a chance to come true. And soon, Ethan's story would take a turn he could never have imagined. A turn that would remind him, and everyone around him, of the power of kindness and the magic of believing in oneself. Ethan's excitement grew as the annual Renaissance Fair approached. Posters advertising the event were plastered all over town, colorful banners showing knights on horseback, jesters juggling colorful balls, and merchants selling trinkets under striped tents. The fair was always a highlight of the year for many families, but for Ethan, it represented something far greater. A chance to step into the world he loved so much. For weeks, he poured his heart into perfecting his homemade night costume. Every evening after dinner, he worked tirelessly at the kitchen table, cutting cardboard, shaping tin foil, and painting intricate designs onto his armor. His little sister, Lily, often sat beside him, watching in awe as her big brother transformed scraps into something extraordinary. The night before the fair, Ethan stood in front of the mirror wearing his completed costume. He held his wooden sword high, imagining himself charging into battle or standing guard at a castle gate. "You look like a real knight," Lily said with a grin, clapping her hands. Ethan smiled back, though a flicker of sadness lingered in his eyes. Deep down, he knew attending the fair wasn't going to happen. Money had been tight at home lately, and his parents had already explained that they couldn't afford tickets this year. Still, Ethan tried not to let his disappointment show. "It's okay," he told himself softly. "Maybe next year." The next morning, Ethan woke up early, unable to shake the longing in his chest. He wandered outside and sat on the porch steps, staring off toward the distant hills where the fairgrounds lay. The sound of laughter and music drifted faintly through the air, carried by the breeze. He pictured the bustling crowds, the smell of roasted turkey legs, and the sight of knights parading in shining armor. It felt cruel, almost to live so close to such magic, yet remain on the outside looking in. As the hours passed, Ethan retreated to his room, flipping through his worn-out book about King Arthur and the Round Table. Each story transported him to another time. A time when honor and bravery mattered more than anything else. But no matter how hard he tried to lose himself in the tales, reality kept creeping back. He thought about the teasing he endured at school, the loneliness that followed him everywhere, and now this missed opportunity. It seemed like life kept finding ways to remind him that dreams weren't meant for someone like him. Later that afternoon, Ethan decided to take a walk to clear his head. He wandered aimlessly until he found himself sitting on a park bench near the edge of town. Around him, children played tag, couples strolled hand in hand, and leaves rustled gently in the wind. Ethan pulled out his sketchbook and began drawing absent-mindedly. Before long, the page filled with images of knights riding horses, their swords raised triumphantly. Sketching always helped calm his mind, even if just a little. Unbeknownst to Ethan, someone was watching him from afar. Captain Marcus, leader of the local reenactment group known as the King's Guard, had been preparing for the fair when he spotted the boy sitting alone. Dressed in full regalia, chainmail glinting in the sunlight, a crimson cape flowing behind him, and a gleaming sword strapped to his side, Marcus approached cautiously. Something about the boy intrigued him. When he noticed the detailed sketches scattered across the bench, Marcus stopped and leaned in for a closer look. "These are incredible," Marcus said warmly, breaking the silence. Startled, Ethan looked up, unsure of what to say. Marcus smiled kindly and gestured to the drawings. "Did you make these?" Ethan nodded shyly, his cheeks turning pink. Encouraged by the boy's talent, Marcus struck up a conversation. They talked about medieval history, famous battles, and the code of chivalry. Ethan's nervousness faded as he spoke passionately about topics he knew so well. For the first time in days, he felt seen, not as the quiet, awkward kid, but as someone whose knowledge and creativity mattered. By the time their conversation ended, Marcus had learned about Ethan's love for knights and his unfulfilled dream of attending the fair. As Ethan gathered his sketches and prepared to leave, Marcus made a silent promise to himself. This boy deserved more than just a passing compliment. He deserved to feel like the hero he dreamed of becoming. And with that thought, an idea began to form, one that would change Ethan's life forever. After meeting Ethan at the park, Captain Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the boy with the big heart and even bigger dreams. There was something special about Ethan, his quiet determination, his passion for medieval tales, and the way his eyes lit up when he spoke about knights and honor. It reminded Marcus of why he had started the King's Guard in the first place, to bring joy, inspiration, and a sense of wonder to people's lives. As he walked back to the fairgrounds, still dressed in his shining armor, Marcus felt a spark of purpose ignite within him. He knew he had to do something for Ethan. That evening, after the day's festivities at the Renaissance Fair had wound down, Marcus gathered his fellow members of the King's Guard around a campfire. They were a diverse group. Some were teachers, others mechanics or office workers, but they all shared a love for history and a desire to make a difference. Sitting cross-legged on wooden benches, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames, they listened intently as Marcus recounted his encounter with Ethan. "He's got this incredible talent," Marcus explained, holding up one of Ethan's sketches that he'd asked permission to keep. "Look at this detail. And the way he talks about knights. It's like he's lived in their world his whole life." The group murmured in agreement, passing the drawing around. But it wasn't just Ethan's artistic skill that moved them. It was the story behind it. Marcus told them about the homemade armor, the dream of attending the fair, and the disappointment Ethan tried so hard to hide. By the time Marcus finished speaking, there wasn't a dry eye among them. "We can't let him miss out," said Sarah, one of the group's archers, her voice firm with resolve. "This kid deserves to feel like a knight, even if it's just for one day." Her words struck a chord, and soon ideas began flowing freely. What if they invited Ethan to join them at the fair? Not as a spectator, but as part of their team, an honorary member of the King's Guard. The more they talked, the more excited they became. This wasn't just about making a boy happy. It was about showing him that he mattered, that his dreams were worth fighting for. The next morning, Marcus reached out to Ethan's parents to explain their plan. At first, they were hesitant, unsure if Ethan would feel comfortable stepping into such a public role, but Marcus reassured them. "We'll take care of everything," he promised. "All he has to do is show up and be himself." Touched by the sincerity in his voice, Ethan's parents agreed, grateful for the kindness being shown to their son. With their blessing, the group sprang into action. They crafted an official invitation, complete with fancy calligraphy and a wax seal bearing the emblem of the King's Guard. Inside, the letter read, "To Sir Ethan, you are hereby summoned to the Kingdom of Merriment on the morrow to receive the highest honor bestowed upon those of noble spirit. Your courage, creativity, and unwavering dedication to the ways of chivalry have not gone unnoticed. Prepare yourself, for you shall be knighted in a ceremony befitting a true hero." They slipped the letter under Ethan's door late that night, ensuring it would be the first thing he saw when he woke up. As they quietly returned to their cars, the members of the King's Guard couldn't help but smile, imagining the look on Ethan's face when he discovered what awaited him. For many of them, this was more than just another event. It was a chance to create a memory that would last a lifetime. Back home, Ethan lay asleep, unaware of the storm of excitement brewing outside. Tomorrow would bring surprises beyond anything he could have imagined, proving that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change someone's entire world. The next morning, sunlight streamed through Ethan's bedroom window, gently waking him from a deep sleep. Still groggy, he reached for his glasses on the nightstand and slipped them on. That's when he noticed it. A rolled-up piece of parchment tied with a red ribbon, resting just inside his doorway. His heart skipped a beat as he climbed out of bed and picked it up. The paper felt heavy in his hands, almost magical, and the wax seal stamped with a crest made his pulse quicken. Carefully breaking the seal, he unrolled the letter and began to read. At first, Ethan thought it might be a joke or some kind of prank, but as his eyes scanned the elegant handwriting, his doubts melted away. This wasn't just any note. It was an official summons, calling him to the Renaissance Fairgrounds to receive a special honor. He read it over and over again, each word sinking deeper into his soul. Your courage, creativity, and unwavering dedication to the ways of chivalry have not gone unnoticed. Tears welled up in his eyes as he realized someone, real knights, no less, had seen him, truly seen him, and believed he was worthy of recognition. Ethan ran downstairs, clutching the letter tightly, and showed it to his parents. They hugged him, their faces glowing with pride and excitement. "This is amazing, sweetheart," his mom said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You've worked so hard on your costume and your drawings. Now it's your turn to shine." Ethan nodded, though his mind raced with questions. What did this mean? Would he really get to meet the King's Guard? And what exactly was a knighthood ceremony? Despite the uncertainty, one thing was clear. Today was going to be unlike any other day in his life. After breakfast, Ethan carefully put on his homemade armor, making sure every piece was perfect. He polished the tin foil until it gleamed and adjusted the straps holding the cardboard plates together. For extra luck, he tucked his favorite sketch of a knight into his pocket. As he stood in front of the mirror, he barely recognized himself. Gone was the quiet boy who often doubted his place in the world. In his reflection, he saw a warrior, someone brave enough to face whatever lay ahead. When Ethan arrived at the fairgrounds, his heart pounded like a drum. The entrance was bustling with activity, vendors setting up stalls, performers rehearsing routines, and families streaming in with wide-eyed children. Just as he started to feel overwhelmed, a familiar figure stepped forward. It was Captain Marcus, dressed in full regalia, his crimson cape flowing behind him. Behind him stood the rest of the king's guard, lined up in 2 rows, their armor gleaming under the morning sun. "Sir Ethan," Marcus called out, his voice booming with authority yet warm with kindness. "We've been expecting you." Ethan froze for a moment, unsure if he should bow or salute, or simply stand there gaping. Then, slowly, he walked toward them, his steps hesitant but steady. As he approached, the guards erupted into cheers, clapping, and chanting his name. "Hail, Sir Ethan! Hail the defender of dreams!" Their voices echoed across the grounds, drawing curious glances from passers-by. Marcus knelt slightly to meet Ethan's gaze, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "Today, you join our ranks, not as a spectator, but as one of us. You've earned this honor through your creativity, your passion, and your belief in the values of chivalry. Are you ready?" Ethan could only nod, too choked up with emotion to speak. Never in his wildest dreams had he imagined being welcomed like this, like a true hero. With Marcus leading the way, Ethan followed the group into the heart of the fairgrounds. Everywhere they went, people stopped to watch. Children pointed excitedly, whispering to their parents about the new knight walking among them. Vendors tipped their hats in respect, and even jesters paused mid-performance to cheer him on. Ethan felt like he'd stepped straight into one of his drawings, except this time, he wasn't just imagining it. This was real. As they made their way to the grand pavilion where the ceremony would take place, Ethan couldn't help but glance around in awe. Colorful banners fluttered in the breeze, merchants displayed shiny swords and intricate jewelry, and the smell of roasted food filled the air. But none of that compared to the feeling swelling inside him, a mix of joy, disbelief, and pure gratitude. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt like he belonged somewhere. Not because he fit in perfectly, but because these strangers had chosen to see the best in him and celebrate it. Little did Ethan know, the most unforgettable part of the day was still ahead. The king's guard had planned every detail to make sure this moment stayed etched in his memory forever. And as he took his place beneath the pavilion, surrounded by cheering crowds in shining armor, Ethan realized something profound. Sometimes, all it takes is one act of kindness to remind some. The grand pavilion was a sight to behold. Its towering wooden beams were draped with banners in deep crimson and gold, fluttering gently in the breeze. Colorful flowers lined the edges of the platform, their sweet fragrance mingling with the earthy scent of hay scattered across the ground. A large throne-like chair sat at the center, adorned with velvet cushions and intricate carvings that looked like they belonged in a castle. The air buzzed with anticipation as fairgoers gathered around, curious about the unusual ceremony taking place. Ethan stood at the edge of the pavilion, flanked by members of the king's guard. Despite his nerves, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. This wasn't just any stage. It was a place where legends were made, where stories came alive. Captain Marcus stepped forward, raising his hands to quiet the growing crowd. His voice rang out clear and strong, carrying an authority that commanded respect. "Ladies and gentlemen, knights and maidens, gather close." Marcus began, his words drawing everyone's attention. Today, we honor a young man whose heart beats for justice, whose mind dreams of valor, and whose spirit embodies the true essence of knighthood. He paused, letting his gaze sweep over the audience before turning to Ethan. This is Sir Ethan, a warrior not of sword and shield alone, but of courage, creativity, and unwavering determination. A murmur rippled through the crowd as people craned their necks to get a better look at the boy standing quietly in homemade armor. Some smiled warmly. Others whispered to their children, pointing out how unique and inspiring Ethan's presence was. For Ethan, the weight of so many eyes on him felt overwhelming, but Marcus's steady hand on his shoulder grounded him. Marcus continued, his tone shifting to one of reverence. In the days of old, knights swore oaths to protect the weak, uphold truth, and serve with honor. These virtues are timeless, and today we recognize someone who carries them in his heart. Sir Ethan has shown us that bravery isn't always loud. It can be quiet, thoughtful, and steadfast, and it is my privilege to bestow upon him the title of Knight, Defender of Dreams. With those words, Marcus motioned for Ethan to kneel. Trembling slightly, Ethan lowered himself onto one knee, clutching his wooden sword tightly. The crowd fell silent, holding their breath as Marcus drew his ceremonial blade, a gleaming replica of a medieval longsword, and held it aloft. The sunlight caught the metal, making it shine like fire. Slowly, Marcus tapped the flat side of the blade against each of Ethan's shoulders, his movements deliberate and solemn. "Arise, Sir Ethan," Marcus declared, his voice booming with pride. "From this day forth, you are a knight of honor, protector of hope, and bearer of light. May your deeds inspire others, and may your dreams guide you ever forward." Time seemed to stand still as Ethan rose to his feet, tears streaming down his face. The crowd erupted into thunderous applause, cheering and whistling as if welcoming a conquering hero home from battle. Children waved enthusiastically, parents wiped away tears, and even seasoned performers stopped what they were doing to join in the celebration. It was more than just a ceremony. It was a moment of pure magic, one that reminded everyone present of the power of kindness and inclusion. As Ethan turned to face the cheering crowd, he noticed something extraordinary. People weren't just clapping for him. They were chanting his name. "Sir Ethan! Sir Ethan!" The sound washed over him like a wave, filling him with a warmth he'd never known before. For years, he'd felt invisible, like no one truly understood him. But here, surrounded by strangers turned friends, he realized he had been seen all along, just not in the way he expected. Captain Marcus handed Ethan a small medal engraved with the emblem of the King's Guard. "Wear this as a reminder of your strength," he said softly, so only Ethan could hear. "You've already inspired us more than you know." Ethan nodded, clutching the medal tightly as if it were a treasure beyond measure. Before leaving the pavilion, Marcus led Ethan to the front of the platform, where photographers snapped pictures and reporters jotted notes. "Smile, Sir Ethan," Marcus urged, placing a hand on his back. Ethan did, though his grin was shy and uncertain at first. But as the flashes went off and the cheers continued, his smile grew wider, brighter, until it lit up the entire pavilion. In that moment, Ethan didn't feel like the boy who sat alone sketching knights in his room. He felt like exactly who he was meant to be: a knight, a dreamer, and a beacon of hope for anyone who dared to believe in themselves. And as the ceremony ended, Ethan knew this was only the beginning. With the ceremony complete, Ethan stepped off the platform and into a whirlwind of excitement. The King's Guard surrounded him, clapping him on the back and congratulating him as if he were one of their own. "Welcome to the ranks, Sir Ethan," said Sarah, the archer, with a wide grin. She handed him a small wooden shield painted with his initials, E.D., and the emblem of the King's Guard. "This is yours now. Carry it proudly." Ethan stared at the shield in disbelief, running his fingers over the smooth surface. It was more than just a gift. It was a symbol that he truly belonged. Captain Marcus wasted no time introducing Ethan to the rest of the day's activities. "As an honorary knight, you'll be joining us for everything. he explained, his voice brimming with enthusiasm. "Battles, parades, even the feast later tonight. You're part of the team now." Ethan's eyes widened at the thought. He had dreamed of attending the Renaissance Fair, but never imagined he'd play such a central role in its festivities. The first stop was the jousting arena, where knights on horseback prepared for mock battles. The crowd cheered wildly as two riders charged toward each other, lances aimed at their opponents' shields. When it was Ethan's turn to participate, Marcus helped him mount a calm, gentle horse named Shadow. Though nervous at first, Ethan found comfort in the rhythmic sway of the horse's steps and the encouraging words of the guards around him. As Shadow trotted into the arena, the crowd erupted into applause, chanting Ethan's name once again. Even though he didn't wield a lance like the others, simply riding alongside the knights made him feel unstoppable. Next came the parade through the fairgrounds. Ethan marched with the king's guard, his cardboard armor gleaming under the sun as they waved to delighted spectators. Children ran up to him, asking for autographs or begging to take pictures. At first, Ethan hesitated. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, but the warm smiles and genuine admiration from the crowd gave him confidence. For the first time in his life, he felt like a celebrity, someone people looked up to and admired. Throughout the afternoon, Ethan joined the guards in various demonstrations, from sword-fighting exhibitions to storytelling sessions about medieval legends. During one session, Marcus invited Ethan to share his favorite tale from King Arthur's court. Though his voice trembled at first, Ethan soon lost himself in the story, speaking passionately about Sir Gawain's quest for honor and loyalty. When he finished, the audience erupted into applause, leaving Ethan speechless with gratitude. Between events, vendors approached Ethan with gifts, a leather pouch filled with coins, a delicate silver chain meant to hold his medal, and even a tiny pewter goblet engraved with the words, "To Sir Ethan, Defender of Dreams." Each gift carried a message of kindness, reminding him how much he was valued. By the end of the day, Ethan's pockets were stuffed with tokens of appreciation, each one a reminder of the connections he'd made. As evening fell, the group gathered for a grand feast inside a massive tent decorated with twinkling lanterns and long wooden tables laden with food. Roasted turkey legs, hearty stews, fresh baked bread, and sweet pastries filled the air with mouth-watering aromas. Ethan sat among the guards, laughing and sharing stories as if he'd known them all his life. For dessert, a towering cake shaped like a castle was brought out, complete with sugar-spun turrets and edible knights standing guard. Someone handed Ethan the first slice, declaring, "A hero deserves the finest treat." By the time the fireworks lit up the night sky, Ethan's heart was overflowing with joy. Every moment of the day had been a celebration, not just of knighthood, but of who he was as a person. The loneliness that had shadowed him for so long seemed to vanish, replaced by a sense of belonging he'd never experienced before. As he watched the colorful bursts of light reflect off the faces of those around him, Ethan realized something profound. Dreams don't always come true the way you expect them to, but when they do, they can change your life forever. And as the final firework faded into the darkness, Ethan knew this day would stay etched in his memory, not just as the day he became a knight, but as the day he discovered the incredible power of community, kindness, and believing in oneself. As the Renaissance Fair drew to a close, Ethan found himself standing at the edge of the bustling fairgrounds, watching the last of the visitors pack up and leave. The air was filled with the soft hum of cleanup efforts, vendors folding tents, performers packing props, and children clutching souvenirs as they headed home with their families. Despite the fading energy, Ethan's heart still raced with excitement. Every moment of the day had been nothing short of extraordinary, but it wasn't until now, in the quiet aftermath, that he truly began to process everything that had happened. For most of his life, Ethan had felt invisible, like a shadow drifting through a world that didn't quite understand him. But today, he hadn't just been seen. He'd been celebrated. Strangers had cheered for him. Children had asked for his autograph, and even grown men and women had thanked him for inspiring them. It was surreal, almost like stepping into one of his drawings where knights were heroes and everyone lived happily ever after. Only this time, it wasn't make-believe. It was real. Captain Marcus approached him, his armor slightly dusty from a long day of activities. "How are you holding up, Sir Ethan?" he asked with a warm smile. Ethan looked up, his face glowing with pride. I don't even know what to say," he admitted, his voice trembling with emotion. "This has been the best day of my life." Marcus chuckled softly and placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You deserve every bit of it," he said firmly. "Never forget how special you are." Before leaving, Marcus handed Ethan a small scroll tied with a red ribbon, the same kind used for his summons earlier that morning. "Open this when you get home," Marcus instructed with a wink. "It's something to remind you of today whenever you need a little boost." Ethan clutched the scroll tightly, already feeling its weight as something precious. On the drive home, Ethan sat quietly in the backseat, replaying the events of the day in his mind. His parents glanced at each other in the rearview mirror, their faces beaming with pride. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart," his mom said, reaching back to squeeze his hand. Ethan nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. For once, he didn't feel the need to explain himself or justify his passions. The world had finally caught up to the dreams he'd always carried in his heart. When they arrived home, Ethan carefully placed all the gifts he'd received throughout the day on his desk. The wooden shield, the pewter goblet, the leather pouch of coins, and the medal bearing the emblem of the King's Guard. Each item told a story, a reminder of the people who had gone out of their way to make him feel valued. As he arranged them, he noticed how much brighter his room seemed, as if the joy from the fair had followed him home. Finally, he picked up the scroll Marcus had given him and untied the ribbon. Inside, written in elegant calligraphy, was a simple yet powerful message. To Sir Ethan, defender of dreams. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to move forward despite it. Your creativity, kindness, and unwavering spirit inspire us all. Remember, you are never alone. The kingdom believes in you. Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes as he read the words over and over again. They weren't just a thank you note. They were a promise that he mattered, not just today, but every day moving forward. He tucked the scroll safely into his sketchbook, knowing it would become one of his most treasured possessions. That night, as Ethan lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he thought about how much had changed in just 24 hours. Yesterday, he'd been a boy sitting alone on a park bench, dreaming of knights and castles. Today, he was Sir Ethan, a knight honored by an entire community. The loneliness that had once weighed so heavily on him now felt lighter, replaced by a newfound confidence. He realized that while he might not fit in everywhere, there were people who appreciated him exactly as he was, and that was enough. As sleep finally took hold, Ethan drifted off with a smile on his face, imagining himself riding into battle alongside the King's Guard, his sword held high. In his dream, the crowd cheered louder than ever before, chanting his name as he led the charge. And for the first time, he didn't wake up wishing it were real. He knew it already was. The story of Sir Ethan didn't end when the Renaissance Fair came to a close. In fact, it was only the beginning of something much bigger, a ripple effect of kindness that spread far beyond the fairgrounds and into the hearts of everyone who had witnessed his knighthood ceremony. Over the following weeks, news of what the King's Guard had done for Ethan began to circulate throughout the town, and eventually, beyond it. Local newspapers wrote articles about the honorary knight, sharing photos of Ethan in his homemade armor and recounting the heartfelt ceremony. Social media posts praising the gesture went viral, with thousands of people commenting on how inspired they were by the act of compassion. For Ethan, life started to feel different in small but meaningful ways. At school, classmates who had once ignored or teased him now greeted him with smiles and nods of respect. Some even approached him during lunch to ask about knights and medieval history, genuinely curious about the stories he loved so much. Teachers noticed a change too. Ethan seemed more confident in class, raising his hand to answer questions and participating in group projects without hesitation. It wasn't just that he felt accepted. He felt celebrated for being exactly who he was. But the impact wasn't limited to Ethan alone. Inspired by the King's Guard's actions, other members of the community began finding ways to make a difference in their own corners of the world. A local bakery started donating leftover pastries to families in need. A group of high school students organized a talent show to raise money for special needs programs. Even strangers passing through town shared stories of how hearing about Ethan's day as a night had reminded them to look for opportunities to uplift others. What had begun as one act of kindness had sparked a chain reaction, proving that even the smallest gestures could create waves of positivity. The King's Guard themselves decided to keep the spirit alive. They expanded their mission, inviting individuals with unique stories, children battling illnesses, seniors feeling forgotten, or anyone struggling to find their place, to participate in future events. Each guest was treated like royalty, given a role in parades or ceremonies, and sent home with tokens of appreciation. Captain Marcus often reflected on how meeting Ethan had changed not only the boy's life, but also the purpose of their group. "We're not just here to entertain anymore," he told his fellow guards. "We're here to remind people that they matter." As for Ethan, he carried the lessons of that magical day with him wherever he went. His confidence grew steadily, both at school and at home. He continued sketching knights and castles, but now his drawings included scenes from the fair, the cheering crowds, the gleaming swords, and the moment he rose to his feet as Sir Ethan. One day, he even showed his art teacher some of his work, who encouraged him to enter an upcoming student art exhibit. To everyone's delight, one of his pieces, a vibrant depiction of a knight holding a shield emblazoned with the words "Defender of Dreams," won second place. Months later, Ethan received another surprise. Captain Marcus invited him back to the next year's Renaissance Fair, not as a guest, but as an official member of the King's Guard. This time, he would help lead the ceremonies, welcoming new honorary knights and sharing his story with those who needed to hear it most. Standing on the same platform where he'd once knelt, Ethan looked out at the sea of faces below him and felt a surge of gratitude. He realized that while life still had its challenges, he no longer faced them alone. He had a kingdom of supporters cheering him on. In the years that followed, Ethan became a symbol of hope, not just in his town, but across communities touched by his story. People talked about the quiet boy who dreamed of knights and the group of reenactors who turned his dream into reality. And though Ethan never stopped being the kind, creative soul he'd always been, he carried himself differently now, with his head held high and his heart full of courage. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person believing in you to change your entire world. For Ethan, that belief came wrapped in chainmail and a crimson cape. But more importantly, it came from the understanding that everyone deserves to feel like a hero, even if just for one unforgettable day.